Volus. Adventure level, not available. Elf. Kokenan. Larry? Nick asked, dumbfounded. The human's familiarity with the creature helped my heart settle a little, but not by much. Ner and Earl were also taken aback, but they didn't seem to recognize the abomination. I knew what stood before us, though, the epitome of misguided mortal ambition and a testament to the depravity that lurks within us all. My master had allowed me the use of his library whenever I finished my daily duties earlier than expected. Of the vast number of books contained within, only one tome dared to depict the terrible nature of a lich. Even that tome only spoke in allegory and metaphor, so as to protect its reader from the true horrors involved.
"Surprised to see me?" Lord Vyslmiro chuckled. "York recommended me to High Chief Ullamak."
"Well, that doesn't surprise me," Nick sighed. "You agreed, though?"
"Of course. I possess a great deal of knowledge and experience that would benefit a great many."
The lich nodded somberly.
"High Chief Ullamak sent a very respectful delegation who made certain to point this out to me. They effectively guilted me into it."
A mortal that wishes to become a lich must subject several victims to extensive tortures and extract specific humours from what little blood remains. The process of this extraction is always fatal, releasing each of the poor victims from their mangled mortal shell. The lich then uses these humours to craft a potion that allows them to escape the notice of the higher ones, while they take the next step towards their own damnation. The tome that I read did not specify the number of victims required, but it implied that it was over 100. It also implied that the next step in the process requires twice that number of victims, all of whom had to be children or infants. Anything capable of such terrible acts would be crushed under the weight of their guilt, were they able to feel even a smidge of empathy. So how can this thing be guilted into something? Could this creature be something other than a lich? What about the kobolds? Nick asked.
"They've achieved a semblance of self-sufficiency. Simif, the kobold you're familiar with, has a rather surprising knack for leadership. With some clear and concise instructions, they should be able to thrive without me for quite some time," the lich explained, then laughed. "I can only hope that my instructions were clear and concise enough. Now, please, take your seats."
Nick nodded and unceremoniously plopped himself into one of the chairs. The orcs and I shared a glance and reluctantly followed suit. Our teacher was likely an abomination, but there was little I could do about it. Attacking it would spell my doom, regardless of whether or not I was successful in destroying it, which was quite unlikely. Plus, what if it wasn't actually a lich?
"Thank you for your prompt attendance," it said with a nod. "My name is Larry Vyslmiro, Lord of the Fallen and King of the Kobolds."
With the pronouncement of his title, several facts came together within my mind. Vyslmiro, as in House Vyslmiro, the noble house founded by the great Magus, Imlor Vyslmiro the Grand, the most famous gnome to ever live. Larry Vyslmiro, his son, was one of the greatest healers to ever grace the mortal realm. But it can't be the same Larry Vyslmiro. A lich can live in perpetuity, but how could someone with such legendary kindness and compassion become such a monstrosity? And how could it dare to show its face here in such a state? Is it counting upon our own kindness and ignorance to avoid punishment for its misdeeds? Or was the great Larry Vyslmiro cursed somehow, and simply resembles a lich?
"I'm afraid that due to the customs of the unified chiefdoms, you must refer to me as Lord Vyslmiro," it explained. "Of course, I won't do anything if you call me something else, but—"
The lich trailed off, and looked pointedly at the muscular elf sitting behind us. She smiled at our glances with a hint of maliciousness. I noticed the emblem of the Pormos trade union pinned to her shirt. A trade union enforcer. Despite her chosen trade, I felt a sort of kinship with her. Like me, she was an elf surrounded by orcs and worked in a male-dominated field. I wondered if she had felt as much pressure from them during her career as I had in my own. Probably, but whilst I must utilize passive aggression and my wits, she probably just punches anyone that gets too mouthy. Must be cathartic.
"In this class, I will be teaching you everything that I know about the art of healing," Lord Vyslmiro explained. However, before we begin our lesson, I feel that my current state of being needs to be addressed. I am a lich.
My heart pounded at the confirmation. An obscenity stood before us, intending to teach us the sacrosanct art of healing. What in the hells was happening here? Has the High Chief lost his mind? The colour drained from Nir's face, but Il cautiously raised his hand.
Yes?
Lord Vyslmiro asked.
Well, Lord,
Il stammered.
What's a lich?
I appreciate the question. It takes courage to reveal one's ignorance and attempt to correct it.
It paused for a moment, as if to gather its words.
A lich is the atrocious result of an utterly disgraceful attempt to violate the natural order of life and achieve immortality.
He practically spat the words, and the venom in his tone shocked me. Where was this anger coming from? Is he ashamed of what he has done? Nora and I shared a quick expression of confusion with the other, but Nick noticed. Lord Vyslmiro didn't choose to become a lich, Nick explained. It was forced upon him by
Nick. Though speaking out of turn is correct.
Our teacher interrupted.
The story of how I was turned into what I am is a matter for another time, though. We have precious little time together, and plenty to learn.
I raised my hand, cutting him off. His attention turned to me, and I stared into the void that his eye should rest in.
Yes? He asked.
I'm sorry, Lord Vyslmiro, but I have to know, I said, gathering my courage. You seem to acknowledge that your existence is an affront to all that is good and right, but, well, why haven't you... I trailed off, too afraid to finish the question. Silence filled the classroom as my classmates stared at me in shock. The only one who had seemed to expect the question was the lich.
Try to end my existence?
Lord Vyslmiro finished my question, then sighed.
I hardly see how that's any of your business, but if you must know, I have. Unfortunately, a lich cannot kill itself. I can do nothing that may harm my phylacteries, not even reveal their locations, and damaging my own physical form will only result in my own revival.
But that's quite enough, the elf behind me angrily interrupted. Lord Vyslmiro, please start your lesson. The lich stared at me for a moment, his skull utterly devoid of expression, then played with some papers at its desk. It then stood and began to lecture us on the art of healing. I received some rather unkind glances from my classmates that caused me to blush, but before long they were enraptured by the lesson. I tried to pay attention as Lord Vyslmiro explained the basic concepts of healing spells, but my thoughts were racing. How can one be forced into lichdom? Even so, why would the High Chief choose them to teach something so sacrosanct? Finally, why am I the only one who seems to be upset by this development? Perhaps I had taken after my master too much. For almost a decade now, I had served as the butler of Lord Alvintis Maxim, patriarch of the Maxim clan. I had often been told that his views on right and wrong were much too black and white, but they had always made sense to me. His views on morality were the entire reason I was able to attend this school in the first place. Ever since I revealed my desire to learn magic to him as a young girl, he'd been lamenting how unfair it is to keep me as his butler. He had even queried several mages over the years, hoping to find me a sufficient tutor. They were all either too busy or too greedy, though. When High Chief Olamak had requested that Lord Maxim invest in this school, my master agreed on the condition that I be accepted. It was a very kind gesture, one which I am utterly unworthy of, but it came with a catch. The Maxim clan is no longer in a position in which to be charitable. Once I achieve competency in magic, I'll return to my master and act as his head of security and advisor of the arcane until my retirement. It's an arrangement that I'm more than happy with, of course, but Lord Maxim still lamented its necessity. The previous head of security had fled her post to elope with Lord Maxim's youngest daughter. A lesser Mer would have had bounty hunters on her tail for her audacity, but he simply wished the young couple well and chose me to fill the position. Things had lined up almost perfectly, in fact. I wondered what my master would do in my position, and decided to write him and ask. He will be able to judge the situation better than I ever could. If I'm right to fill this way, he'll explain what I should do about it. If I'm in the wrong, he'll explain why in such a way that will alleviate my ill feelings. Satisfied with my decision, I turned my attention back to the lich and noticed that he was staring at me.
Young elf, I realize that you must have a lot on your mind, but it will be difficult to catch up if you lose focus.
Lord Vyslmiro said. Young? I stuttered, dumbfounded. The lich tilted his head at me, seemingly confused, then seemed to have a revelation.
Ha! My apologies. You must be older than I take you for and unused to being called young. He chuckled. In my defense, though, you are much, much younger than I am.
How old are you?
Earl asked. Come now, that's hardly relevant to the lesson at hand.
Oh, yeah, sorry, my lord. I was just curious.
Understandable. Truth be told, I am unsure. I have spent quite a long time underground, you see. In dungeons, it is difficult to keep track of whether it is day or night, so I quickly lost track of such things. The calendar has changed as well, so I would have to find a historian to help me figure it out. Frankly, it isn't worth the effort. Suffice it to say that I'm more than a lifetime older than all of you put together.
So you'd be bones anyway?
Everyone in the class gave Earl an exasperated expression.
Oh, sorry, my lord,
Earl said, rubbing his neck. Lord Vyslmiro gave Earl a pointed look, then continued his lesson. He explained that the efficacy of healing depends greatly upon the caster's knowledge of anatomy and physiology. Then, for Earl's benefit, he explained what anatomy and physiology meant.
Like other forms of magic, if one knows exactly what the spell should be doing, the spell will do it better, he said. By better, I mean both faster and more thoroughly. Let's have an example. Who can tell me what a liver does?
I reluctantly raised my hand.
Yes?
The liver balances one's humours, does it not? I asked.
That is correct.
The lich nodded happily as Nick raised his hand.
Oh, we have another answer. Go ahead, Nick.
Balancing the humans is a fair summary, but I have learned several of its specific functions, if you're interested. Nick said, a little shyness seeping into his voice.
Of course, go ahead.
Nick then explained that one's liver processes all of the blood that leaves one's digestive system. It does several things during its processing, such as regulate amino acids, convert sugar into a form that's easier to store, removing bacteria from the blood, converting ammonia to urea, as well as produce proteins, cholesterol, and bile. Lord Vyslmiro, Ner, and I were absolutely enraptured by his explanations. All was predictably confused. Lord Vyslmiro asked Nick to explain what each of these byproducts were, and the human did his best to do so. He noted that the class in which he learned this information was considered rudimentary by his society standards, but I had already retrieved my journal and began taking meticulous notes. It occurred to me that one likely had to perform some rather ethically questionable research to learn information like this, but I decided to let it be. It was possible that my reaction toward Lord Vyslmiro had already made a fool of me, and it's best to only do that once a day if one can help it.
Very good, Nick.
Lord Vyslmiro nodded thoughtfully.
Thank you for your insight. Now for the example question. If your patient was stabbed in the liver, whose healing would be the most effective? The humans or the elves?
Earl raised his hand before everyone else, and the lich gestured to him.
Well, Vola's had a good answer, but I think Nick's beat hers, he said. Plus, he's already a pretty powerful mage. His healing's probably top-notch.
Good.
Lord Vyslmiro's skull seemed to smile.
You're correct in both regards, actually. Having an intricate knowledge regarding the functions of the body will save you from having to cast your healing spells multiple times. But if you have a large reserve of magic, you'll be able to counteract your ignorance. Having both will allow you to heal more people and cast more intricate healing spells.
Nick raised his hand.
Yes, Nick?
Do you know anything about being able to continually cast minor heal, Lord Vyslmiro?
Continually cast? As opposed to casting multiple times in quick succession?
Yes.
I've never heard of such a thing.
The lich tilted his skull.
Care to elaborate?
I don't think I can, Nick said, rubbing his neck. Not without your Mr. Alta. Lord Vyslmiro opened his jaw to reply, but the bell rang before he could say anything.
Ah, well, perhaps we should have an after-school meeting then, he laughed. Can I have a volunteer retrieve Mr. Alta, please?
I quickly raised my hand, hoping to be able to attend this meeting. Nick seemed to have quite a lot of knowledge, and I couldn't help but want every last bit of it.
Thank you for volunteering.
Lord Vyslmiro nodded at me.
As for the rest of you, I will see you tomorrow. You're dismissed.
Ignoring the curious looks from Earl and Nur, I gave him my things and rushed to Mr. Alta's classroom. We found him at his desk, writing something on a long scroll of paper.
Oh, yes? He asked. How can I help you?
Hello, Mr. Alta. Apologies for the interruption. Lord Vyslmiro and Nick are having a meeting that requires your attendance, sir, I explained. It's about healing magic.
I see. Okay, lead the way.
Mr. Alta stood from his desk and followed me out of the classroom. His gait was slower than mine, and I recognized the signs of a serious spinal injury. My younger brother had suffered such a fate, though his injury didn't heal quite as well as Mr. Alta's had. I tempered my curiosity, though. Such an injury is oftentimes a sore subject, and harnessing my relationship with a teacher over something I didn't need to know was a decidedly bad idea. I kept my mouth shut until we reached Lord Vyslmiro's classroom. As we entered, I noticed that the bodyguard had also left.
Lord Vyslmiro,
Mr. Alta said with a small bow.
How can I help you?
Well, Nick brought up a rather interesting topic of conversation and insisted that you be present before it is discussed any further, the Lich replied. I hope you don't mind.
Perish the thought. What, may I ask, is this regarding?
The continuous casting of healing spells.
I suspected as much. Mr. Alta chuckled. We had decided to keep it a secret while some researchers looked further into the matter, but they're well on their way by now. Whilst it likely wouldn't be wise to declare that Nick is the one that made the discovery, there's no longer any need to keep it fully under wraps.
I carefully pulled out my journal to take notes, doing my best not to disturb the meeting. Mr. Alta noticed and chuckled, but Lord Vyslmiro and Nick were focused on the topic at hand. Nick explained how he learned minor heal while trying to save a comrade during a bandit attack. However, he had held the spell instead of casting it multiple times, and had used all of his magic reserve, passing out as a result.
I have never heard of such an occurrence, Lord Vyslmiro said. Neither a case of someone stumbling into healing magic, nor someone extending their cast of said magic. Were you able to save your friend?
The concern in the question caught me off guard. A being as old as Lord Vyslmiro worrying about someone he didn't know, in the face of knowledge that he had yet to obtain about a subject that was undeniably his passion. It would seem that the legends regarding his demeanor were true. I made a mental note to include this in my correspondence with my master. He made it, Nick said. It was pretty close, though.
Abdominal wounds can be rather serious. I'm glad your friend survived.
Lord Vyslmiro nodded. The discussion returned to the subject at hand. Lord Vyslmiro admitted that he was intrigued, and decided that at least part of the class should be spent exploring the possibilities of continuous casting. Mr. Alta made a joke about how nonchalant he was being, but Lord Vyslmiro countered by pointing out that he already knew several spells that had apparently been lost to time.
To me, this happens to be yet another task on a quite long list, the Lich chuckled. I'll ponder on how we shall approach this while you take your rest.
With that, the meeting ended and we went our separate ways. I rushed across the street to the inn, barely remembering to have dinner. After scarfing my food, I rushed to my room and wrote a letter to my master, hoping for guidance. Is someone that is being forced into being an abomination free of the stain regarding their creation? Should I just ignore the fact that Lord Vyslmiro is a lich? If not, what can I do about it? Lord Maxim will know.